Okay, guys, two people who are really making the media turns these days is going to be Nancy Pelosi and Donald Trump. And since I see them so often, I was kind of wondering who is a better investor. So I went ahead and looked it up, and the results are really surprising. So one of these people has an investing track record that beats most Wall Street investors, while the other one has made some pretty questionable financial decisions through their career. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. So at the time being, who is worth more, Donald Trump or Nancy Pelosi? So I looked this up, and Donald Trump is estimated to be worth between $4 billion and $6 billion. Now, a lot of that wealth supposedly was inherited from his father, which was a real estate developer. It's estimated that he somewhere around $400 million, and that's based off of inheritance, various loans through his father, and gifts. But over the 50-year career, he's turned that into somewhere between $4 billion and $6 billion. Now, when we compare that with Nancy Pelosi, she's estimated somewhere between $100 and $250 million, which is a lot of money, but it's not really that much in comparison to $4 billion or $6 billion that Donald Trump is worth. So she was born into a political family. However, she was not born wealthy. Her and her husband, Paul Pelosi, have built that wealth basically off of business investments and real estate investments in California. So on pure net worth alone, Donald Trump is worth a lot more than Nancy Pelosi, but that doesn't really tell the whole picture. So a big question right now is, how did Nancy Pelosi's stock portfolio really do as far as performance wise? So this is where it gets pretty interesting. So Nancy Pelosi and her husband, Mr. Pelosi, have one of the most talked about stock trades in all of the internet. And that's because the numbers are just really remarkable. According to a lot of analysts, Nancy Pelosi has beat the S&P 500. In fact, some years she's beat the S&P 500 by 20%. And other analysts have said that her stock portfolio has beat the S&P 500 for decades. So just to put that into perspective, most Wall Street hedge fund managers cannot beat the S&P 500 growth. So for a political family to do that year after year, it is really quite remarkable and has brought up a lot of different questions. Now we compare that with Donald Trump. So supposedly he had inherited and received upwards of $400 million from his late father. So a lot of analysts have said that if he had simply put that into a basic indexed fund, he would probably be worth more than the $4 billion or $6 billion that he's worth today. So in other words, a lot of his active business decisions probably underperformed. One of the more famous stories about him are his Atlantic City casinos were mostly considered a failure in addition to his other ventures such as Trump University, Trump Airlines, Trump Vodka. All of those were mostly considered a failure in addition to 6 corporate bankruptcies supposedly. So while he is skilled at real estate development and also branding, his pure investor numbers are mixed at best. So you might be asking yourself, like a lot of people, are Nancy Pelosi's stock trades legal? And the short answer is yes. Yes, it is legal. Currently, members of Congress can trade individual stocks, and there was something called the Stock Act that was passed in 2012, which says that they can trade those stocks. They just have to disclose it within 45 days, but it doesn't stop them from making the trades in the first place. So this is definitely one of the biggest debates in politics, as members of Congress generally are going to get information that the general public wouldn't know, and they're able to trade with that information. If anybody outside of Congress were to do that, it would be considered insider trading. So that's why a lot of Congress people have introduced bills to ban or limit Congress members from trading individual stocks, but none have passed so far. So what are some of these famous trades by Nancy Pelosi anyways? So one of the most famous trades there were lots of call option contracts bought on Microsoft before it was publicly known that they had received a large contract from the Pentagon for cloud computing. Also, the Pelosi's famously bought a lot of NVIDIA stock right before a lot of AI chip legislation was passed. When that was passed, it really boosted the NVIDIA stock. They also purchased Apple stock and Apple options before major product launches were announced. So of course, all of these could be coincidence or just great stock trading, but there happens to be a pattern of them buying call options before major news breaks about these large companies. That, coupled with their excellent winning streak, makes these trades questionable. In fact, their winning streak is so strong, there's a lot of different websites and apps that track their trading so that average investors like you and me can go ahead and copy those trades and hopefully catch that tailwind. And what about Donald Trump? So what are some of his best and worst financial moves? So Donald Trump is well known for a lot of his business success and then also for a lot of his failures in the media. So on the winning side, he's built a real estate brand that controls prices globally just with his name. His Trump Towers, his Trump golf courses, all of those have really held their value over the years. And that's just by licensing his name onto a property. He's even gotten into media with Truth Social, so he made a lot of money when that company went public. Now on the losing side, his Atlantic Atlantic City casinos are probably one of the more famous stories. With those bankruptcies, it wiped out hundreds of millions of dollars for a lot of investors. Also, a lot of analysts say that his core real estate holdings have really underperformed in comparison to the larger overall market. So Donald Trump is a skilled deal maker and brander, but as a pure capital allocator, there's a lot of holes in that particular story. So which one of these two investors have taken more financial risk in their career? The truth is both of them have taken significant financial risk throughout their career. However, Donald Trump has done it a lot more loudly. Big real estate bets, casino development. A lot of these deals were highly leveraged, which worked out brilliantly on some deals, and other deals they forced corporate bankruptcy. So his risk style is aggressive and visible. Now you compare that with Nancy Pelosi in options, which by a lot of financial analysts considered them risky just because they can expire worthless. These are basically large leveraged bets on one underlying stock. On top of that, it's going to be for the tech sector, which again is considered extremely volatile. But fortunately for her, a lot of those stock trading options actually worked in her favor. And the difference is a lot of the high risk, high leverage bets that Donald Trump failed on blew up publicly. So what do each of them say about their financial success? Well, that's pretty easy. Donald Trump consistently says that he is the greatest deal maker ever known. He also puts his net worth probably closer to $10 billion instead of the estimated $4 to $6 billion. He also attributes his success to his own genius and deal-making ability. Now you compare that with Nancy Pelosi. She's mostly quiet about her trading ability. In fact, her office often says that she doesn't own any stocks personally, and all of the trading decisions are made independently by her husband, Paul. Now, when various bills are introduced to limit stock trading for members of Congress, she consistently pushes back on accepting a bill that would limit trading. So is there anything that Donald Trump beats Nancy Pelosi as far as investing? The answer is yes. Yes, absolutely. His Trump branded properties like his golf courses and hotels are real physical assets. They're going to keep generating value for decades to come, which is totally different than stock trading returns, which can evaporate in a short amount of time. In fact, real estate as an asset class has been consistently performing for the past 100 years and generally is considered one of the more reliable wealth building tools known to mankind. So who's actually the better investor, Nancy Pelosi or Donald Trump? I would say based off of the pure investment numbers, Nancy Pelosi is going to win. It's nearly impossible to beat the S&P 500 consistently, much less over decades. So whether that comes from skill or maybe insider trading, it's still really impressive. And you compare that with Donald Trump, his investing history is a little bit more complicated. He's definitely built up a brand, lots of different properties throughout the world, but his actual investment decisions could be questionable, especially since a lot of analysts say that if he would have put that money into an index fund, it probably would have beat where his current net worth is currently. So based purely on investments, Nancy Pelosi definitely wins. So if you're wondering who's a better investor, Nancy Pelosi or Donald Trump, I say the data really points to Nancy Pelosi, even though Donald Trump has a higher net worth. Now, with her stock trades beating the stock market year over year and sometimes by even 20%, it's going to be interesting after she leaves Congress if she can those winning trades. So what about you? Who do you think is a better investor, Nancy Pelosi or Donald Trump? Leave a comment below, let the rest of us know, and I'll see you on the next video.